Ancient texts describe a moment when heaven broke its own rules. What followed was a race so powerful, God is said to have erased them from the earth. This is the story of the Nephilim, angels and mortal women, and the giants born between them. Stay with me, because this story never ends the way you'd expect. The word Nephilim means the fallen ones, or some scholars argue, those who cause others to fall. Either way, it was written as a warning. Genesis says humanity had spread across the earth and multiplied fast. Too fast, some would later say, a young world already racing toward a breaking point. Genesis records it in one haunting line. The sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful and took wives for themselves, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. From this union came the Nephilim, and the earth itself is said to have trembled the moment they were born. Later tradition gave these giants names, warlords whispered about for generations, remembered as much for the battles they started as the ones they won. Ancient writings describe them as fierce and increasingly violent, tearing through villages, answering to no law, human or divine. Much of this story's detail survives in an ancient text called the Book of Enoch, and what it describes next gets even stranger. Enoch names their leader as Semjaza, who rallied 200 companions to descend together, bound by an oath, fully aware of the price they'd pay. Another figure, Azazel, is said to have taught humanity forbidden secrets, weapons, jewelry, and sorcery, knowledge that would soon be turned into war. With new weapons and a race of giants roaming free, tradition says violence exploded across the earth faster than humanity could contain it. Some accounts describe the Nephilim tearing through entire harvests in a single night, pushing humanity toward famine and desperation. Enoch describes something haunting, the earth itself crying out under the weight of the violence, its voice reaching all the way to heaven. Tradition says a man named Enoch was sent to deliver the verdict himself, walking straight into the Watchers' camp to tell them their fate was already sealed. Genesis describes it starkly. God saw humanity's wickedness, and his heart was filled with grief. What came next would shake the entire world. A decision was made in heaven, one that would erase and reshape the entire world below. Enoch describes 4 archangels dispatched with 4 separate tasks, each one about to change the course of the entire story. Tradition holds that Raphael was tasked with a single mission, to seize Azazel and bury him beneath the rocks of the desert until Judgment Day. Gabriel's task was different. Tradition says he was sent to incite the Nephilim into destroying one another, turning their own violence back on themselves. And Michael, tradition says, was sent for the leader himself, Semjaza, bound in chains and cast into darkness to await a final judgment still to come. The 4th archangel, Uriel, was sent with a very different task, to find one man and warn him that the whole world was about to end. For years, tradition says, Noah built an enormous vessel, mocked by his neighbors, racing a deadline nobody else believed was real. As the sky turned black, Noah's family rushed the animals aboard and sealed the door just as the first drops began to fall. The remaining watchers, Enoch describes, were dragged down together, chained and hurled into darkness as they fought against their sentence. And then, Genesis says, the rains came, 40 days and 40 nights, as rivers burst their banks and swallowed the world whole. Tradition holds that the Nephilim fought the rising water with everything they had, and still, it wasn't enough. Here's what's strange. Nearly 1,000 miles away, Mesopotamian tablets tell an almost identical flood story, with their own hero, Utnapishtim, building his own ark. Months later, a dove returned carrying an olive branch, the first sign, after all that chaos, that dry land had reappeared. Tradition says the ark finally came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, the first solid ground the world had felt in almost a year. Tradition says a rainbow tore across the clearing sky, a promise, blazing in color, that this would never happen again. From Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, tradition says the entire post-flood world would be repopulated, each line scattering to build new nations. Here's the twist. Long after the flood, later books mention giants again. The Anakim, the Rephaim, and King Og of Bashan standing ready for war. Some traditions link this era to Nimrod, a legendary king described as a mighty warrior, and to a tower his people built that heaven itself is said to have torn down. Centuries later, a giant named Goliath stood on a battlefield and challenged an entire army, until a shepherd boy named David stepped forward instead. Nearly every ancient culture tells some version of this story. Greek titans battling gods, Norse Jötnar clashing with Thor, cultures that likely never met. Islamic tradition tells of its own giants, the towering people of Ad and the mighty Thamud, both said to have been destroyed for their arrogance and defiance. For centuries, explorers unearthed enormous bones in distant lands, fueling legend after legend of a lost race of giants, most later explained as ancient megafauna. Not every giant discovery was real. In 1869, a 10-foot petrified man dug up in New York turned out to be one of the most elaborate hoaxes in American history. In 1947, fragments of the Book of Enoch turned up among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Sudden, undeniable proof this story was ancient beyond doubt. In modern times, some have argued the Watchers weren't angels at all, but visitors from beyond our world. Most historians and theologians reject this reading, but it hasn't stopped the theory from spreading. Not everyone reads this story the same way. Some see literal heavenly beings. Others see 2 human bloodlines colliding. The argument still isn't settled. Thousands of years later, the Nephilim still explode across our imagination, in books, films, and late-night arguments about what really happened. Maybe it endures because it asks something explosive. What happens when power outruns wisdom, and sacred boundaries are torn down without care? Whether read as literal history, sacred allegory, or humanity's oldest cautionary tale, the story of the Nephilim has survived floods, empires, and millennia, and it's still standing. Some stories fade with time. This one somehow never has. If this story fascinated you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are so many more explosive ancient stories still waiting to be uncovered. I'll see you in the next documentary.